Canada has spent over 2 decades trying to replace its aging CF-18 fighter jets. The F-35 was supposed to be the answer. The contract was almost signed. Then Donald Trump launched a trade war against Canada, and Ottawa started asking a very different question. Not which jet do we buy from America, but what if we don't buy American at all? That question just led Canada to the door of a program that has nothing to do with the United States. Canada has formally expressed interest in joining the Global Combat Air Program, known as GCAP, as an observer member. GCAP is a 6th-generation fighter jet program. It is being developed jointly by Japan, the United Kingdom, and Italy. The goal is to build one of the most advanced combat aircraft ever made, a platform designed to replace Japan's Mitsubishi F-2s and the Eurofighter Typhoons used by British and Italian forces. Observer status is not full membership, but it is not nothing either. It gives Canada access to sensitive technical data on the program. It allows Ottawa to review designs, assess procurement options, and consider deeper industrial involvement, potentially including manufacturing roles for Canadian defence companies. This is a significant move. Canada is not just shopping for a jet. Canada is signalling that it is willing to join a defence program that was built entirely without American involvement. The move did not happen overnight. In March 2026, Canadian Defence Minister David McGuinty travelled to Tokyo for a meeting with Japanese Defence Minister Shinjiro Koizumi. That meeting was not widely covered in Western media, but what came out of it laid the groundwork for this announcement. The two ministers discussed an existing defence equipment and technology transfer agreement between Canada and Japan. They agreed to expand it. Defence industry ties between Ottawa and Tokyo are now being actively deepened, something that would have seemed unlikely just 5 years ago. According to Japan's Asahi Shimbun newspaper, a formal announcement of Canada's observer status could come as early as mid-2026, following a defence ministerial meeting in the United Kingdom. The timeline is moving fast, and the location of that next meeting, the UK, is not a coincidence. Britain is one of GCAP's 3 founding members. To understand why Canada is doing this, you need to go back to the F-35. Canada has been trying to buy a new fighter jet since the early 2000s. The CF-18s it currently flies were built in the 1980s. They are old. They need to be replaced. For years, the F-35, made by Lockheed Martin in the United States, was the frontrunner. Canada even committed to a procurement process that pointed directly toward the F-35 as the likely winner. Then the political environment changed completely. When Donald Trump returned to office in 2025, he launched a sweeping tariff campaign against Canada. He threatened Canadian sovereignty. He called Canada a potential 51st state. The relationship between Ottawa and Washington deteriorated in a way that few analysts predicted. Suddenly, buying a weapons system from the United States, one that requires American software updates, American parts, and American approval to operate, looked like a serious strategic vulnerability. If Washington can use trade as a weapon, it can use defense contracts as a weapon too. That realization changed the calculus in Ottawa. Canada started looking for options that did not run through Washington. Observer status inside GCAP is more valuable than it sounds. Under the program's structure, observer countries get access to technical information from all 3 core members: Japan, the UK, and Italy. That includes design data, capability specifications, and procurement timelines. More importantly, observer status opens the door to industrial participation. Canadian aerospace companies could potentially win manufacturing contracts. Components could be built in Canada. Jobs and technology transfer could follow. This is not just about buying a jet. It is about Canada inserting itself into one of the most advanced defense programs on the planet, and doing it on terms that do not require bowing to Washington. Canada has also made clear that GCAP participation would complement its existing programs, not necessarily replace the F-35 entirely. But that framing may be diplomatic cover. The direction of travel is clear. Ottawa is diversifying, and it is doing so urgently. But here is where the story gets complicated. Japan is not enthusiastic about expanding GCAP's membership. Tokyo has already been approached by Australia, India, Saudi Arabia, and several European nations, all of them interested in some form of involvement. Japan has pushed back on most of them. The reason is straightforward. More partners mean more coordination. More coordination means slower decisions. Slower decisions mean missed deadlines. And GCAP already has a deadline problem. The program is targeting 2035 for initial deployment. That is less than a decade away. Key contracts have already been delayed. Some analysts believe the 2035 date is already at risk, even without adding new members to the equation. Canada joining, even as an observer, adds pressure to a program that is already under pressure. So what is really happening here? Canada is not just buying a fighter jet. Canada is repositioning itself in the global defense order. For decades, Canadian defense policy was built around one assumption: that the United States was a permanent, reliable ally. That assumption is now being tested in real time. Trump's tariff war was not just an economic dispute. It was a signal, and Ottawa read it clearly. The pivot toward Japan and Europe, through GCAP, through new bilateral agreements, through defense diversification, is Canada's answer to that signal. This matters beyond aircraft procurement. It is part of a broader pattern. Canada has been strengthening ties with the European Union. It has been deepening Arctic cooperation with Nordic nations. It has been building the case that Canadian sovereignty does not depend on American goodwill. GCAP observer status is one piece of that larger puzzle. The question is whether Japan will allow it to move forward. Tokyo's concerns about timeline and complexity are real, and Japan holds significant influence over who gets access to this program. Canada wants in. Japan is not sure it wants Canada in. That tension will define the next phase of this story. Canada has made its move. The application is on the table. The ministerial meetings are happening. The diplomatic groundwork is being laid. But the outcome is not guaranteed. If Japan allows Canada in, even as an observer, it marks a genuine realignment in how Canada thinks about defense, alliance, and sovereignty. It means Ottawa is serious about reducing its dependence on Washington for the weapons systems that protect its borders. If Japan says no, or quietly delays the decision, Canada will be back to square one. Aging jets, no clear replacement, and a relationship with Washington that is more complicated than ever. Either way, one thing is already true. Canada is no longer quietly waiting for America to solve its problems. It is looking elsewhere, and the world is starting to notice.